Quick little heads up before the video starts. This is going to be a longer one, so please stay for the whole video. It's an interesting one. I'm going to enjoy this. Hopefully if you're watching this, going to enjoy this, so. In Destiny 2, Warlocks have been very much an interesting. They used to be some of the strongest, and then, they went evened out around Forsaken, which I actually was fine with. And then I always like trying to keep all the classes on the same level, or being good at something exceptional. But recently, especially with the launch of Witch Queen and Lightfall, Warlocks have been slowly losing what makes them feel like Warlocks to me. What they had really special to them is getting kind of just taken away, and it's not really okay. It is 100% Bungie's fault. They make the game. They make all the updates, but it's weird because it's based on their philosophy. It's not something they actually are intending to do. Because their philosophy right now is we want to focus more around gunplay, which makes sense. It is a shooter game. But the problem is you have a space magic class which focuses around ability usage. So they want their ability usage to be up, but have weaker gunplay skill, which is why they have weaker jumps and always have special melee grenade skills. Which is, fine in concept. But in practice, you're taking away kind of what, it means to play that class. It's like a clashing of ideologies. You have a thing that's meant to spam abilities and a game that doesn't want you to spam abilities. And now there's a clash where Warlocks are now starting to suffer for this because they're losing things. Especially with the 2.0, we lost a bunch of, healing things. We lost a bunch of void things. Arc was just not as fun as it was, and it didn't feel good around the board. So I'm going to go over each of the subclasses because, personally, I've been playing Warlock for a while, and I felt with Witch Queen 3.0, everything we lost, and its impact, and the funness of it, because, it really doesn't matter if it's not, because, okay, you're going to have something that's horribly, Sweet Business, for example. Is it the most meta? No. But it is a fun exotic to use, which is really all that matters. If you can have fun using it, that's fine. But they took out some of, the fun parts of the subclasses with it, and they kind of just butchered it. So I'm going to go into the subclasses for this, starting with Void. With Void 3.0, I think this is probably the best 3.0. Granted, this was also with Witch Queen's launch, so they probably had to make this the best out of all of them, because it's the one that's supposed to drag people in and be like, oh, if this 3.0 is so good, that means the other 3.0s would be good, which they were not the best. But the charge grenade was nice. Now everything can use handheld supernova, which is a nice alternative to some if you are a close range player. New Child of the Old Gods is really fun because it gives you abilities that slowly drain health, and is actually really nice to have. And Devour still is really nice, and I'm very happy they actually kept it as a part of the kit, rather than something else we'll talk about later. However, none of them are flawless, and one of the things we lost was ability to use our grenades to proc Devour, which I think they should have given us a grenade, because each grenade has a specific charge. Some of them don't have it. Just give it to one of the other ones, like stick grenades. Have it so you can either sacrifice a stick grenade for Devour or such. And then the other thing was we only have one melee, which is the pocket, which is a little pocket ball. And generally, this is a nice tool zone, but this is the only melee that actually can hinder you from getting a melee kill, because when you melee someone, it actually pushes them back, which is a problem because you're most likely going to try and slap them again if you're going for a melee kill. And since not everyone's melees are bound to uncharged and charged, you have this problem of, oh hey, I want to use my melee to get a kill, or then you push them back an accident, which can also lead to sometimes you not actually getting the kill, because I think sometimes this melee actually does slightly less damage than a normal uncharged melee, so they can survive. But this can also track around walls. But the thing that sucks is We lost all of our our two other melees with it, but the problem with it is we don't have a close range melee option. Void is the only class without a close range melee option. Arc has the chain lightning, and Void has the Void has ball, which is not range, and Solar has the incinerator snap, which is meant for close range. We're gonna ignore Stasis and Strand, which I'll get into later, because those are also special for that, because they're different. But besides that, Void's probably the best out of all of them. So, I'd have the least amount of problems with it. That leads us to the one which I actually have the most problems with, Solar. Now, I'm going to be honest. Solar 3.0, to me, was probably one of the worst conversions of the changing of Solar from 2.0 to 3.0 of all light subclasses. Now, Arc is close because I'm just not a fan, but I'm not a fan of it, which is funny because I was a really big fan of Arc 2.0, but we'll get into that when we get dark. But Solar, I think the biggest problem was it was misadvertised. It was misadvertised because it was supposed to be a healing subclass, or a raining fire subclass. You know, come the ultimate fire subclass, or the actual support subclass. And the only things that we got to support went to every class except our Well of Radiance. And our Rift, technically, but that's just a class thing. We should be doing that anyways. So we have Rift and Well. Two stationary objects meant to heal people. Yes, you can technically use the frickin' Lunafaction boots, wherever they are, to use them to heal people. But, that's an exotic doing its job, being something special. I don't know why they gave two of our fragment slots, the Icarus Dash and the Heat Rises. Why those are two different things? Because here's the problem now. If you don't run Icarus Dash with it, you don't get the second dash. So you got nerfed from that, so you're kind of forced to run it if you want the second dash in PvP. Which, honestly, the stronger grenade isn't really worth it. But why do we not get a fragment that supports the healing? That the whole thing, which we're supposed to be a support class for. Why did they give it to every class with a minus discipline effect on it? Because if that is our only way of really healing people on the go, it is a problem. We also lost the same way how we used Devour to, proc with Void. Use our grenade, proc Devour. We use our grenade to proc a free healing grenade, which was very much balanced because you were losing a offensive tool to a defensive tool. And they gave it to every class, in which it broke every class when it came out because it was Solar Season and it did double damage. And now it's just a free healing thing for any class. Which, now, if you want to actually use it, if you want to use it to actually help your team, you get penalized for it. There is not really a healing aspect of us anymore, except for Well of Radiance, which is blatantly really powerful, and our Rift, which we should be using anyways because we need the slightest edge to help us against people with barricades and dodging. Not to mention, they butchered Dawnblade. Bottom Path, yes, I know Bottom Path was, very strong with Dawnblade, with the Dawn Course buff, which actually was a nerf now, but with Dawn Course buffing it, and the on-kill, you got it back. There was nothing wrong with on-kill getting the energy back. It was not overpowered. Yes, I know they don't want us to, keep to spam things, but it was such a dumb thing to take away. And then they nerfed Dawn Chorus, which are trying to bring it back, but you aren't going to bring it back. It has already been hit, and their synergy is gone. Dawnblade is no longer a viable super in PvE or PvP because Well has done everything, which is truthfully the biggest problem with Solar. They want you to use Well and be a support class. which is fine, but they have nothing to really build into a Solar that makes it special to any other class. I could be giving more people Radiant and getting the buff with Hunter, or with Solar Titans with their throwable grenade that comes back to them. And what do we have? A Rift that heals people at most if they decide to walk through it, but most people don't because they're looking somewhere else. Solar is just... It was hyped to be something that was really meant to just be the healings class, or the... They got the rate of fire part down, not well, because everything that really is supposed to support it got nerfed into the ground, and now Heat Rise is the only way to float with a sniper rifle, which I'll get into it another day. But you either are a floating Firemancer or the healing thing, in which Solar was made so that none of them thrived. It's kind of just a shame on how it came out, because like Solar was really fun, especially because you had, you know, all the fire, especially with Dawn Chorus where melee come back, which it still does. With Dawn Chorus, I will admit, the melee thing is still nice. It's still, but everything that made Warlock fun, the actual like supporting, either the actual supporting a middle class where Well is, you know, actually like in a support type thing, to, you know, Top Tree being very movement based, where two of our aspects are based around movement and one of them is based around grenades. Why do we get nothing for something based around support? Yes, technically the grenades can buff your healing thing, but most people are going to use that selfishly because we don't have much survivability. Not to mention, what was butchered with Phoenix Dive? I understand Phoenix Dive when they wanted to bring it in and be like, oh, but why can we not use our Rift with it? Why was Phoenix Dive not part of Heat Rises, which is personally a thing? Because if you gave it to Heat Rises, then it would be like, oh, you could sacrifice your grenade and then you drop, because that just works better. But now you can't use your Rift with it, and it has a longer time than most like other dodges. And since it actually started off even worse because it had time based on Rift, meaning you had to wait practically the entirety of a Rift where you can get all of your health back for a possibility of accidentally jumping and holding circle to get like 1/4 of your health bar back. Solar was just not the best. It was probably the worst out of all of them. But now we gotta get on to my least favorite, which is Arc.
Ultra Big Bang! Kamehameha!
Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know why I don't enjoy Arc as much. Because Arc, here's the thing, it came out, so if you haven't noticed, each 3.0, Solar, Arc, and Void, all had a very specific way they developed their fragments. It was, one was just the same, one was returned buffed, then one new one. We had, for Void, new one was Child of the Old Gods, buffed one was the Charge Grenade, and the returning one was Devour. Solar was Icarus Dash was returning, Heat Rises was buffed, and the new one was the Powerful Grenades. This one, we actually did not get grenades. The one that stayed was Arc Soul. The one that got buffed was Electrostatic Mine, because we got a whole brand new thing for it. And the one that got new was Lightning Surge, which is when you slide, you blink, and you use Jolt. Now, I want to say, I love the idea of Lightning Surge. Being able to go in, slide, it gives Warlocks an actually offensive option. But the problem is, Arc Warlock is not exactly built mostly to go in. Because you think, Arc Soul is very much you set it down, you want to kind of stay by it because you want to keep your Arc Soul up for as long as possible before your Rift disappears. Very much, the whole idea based around Arc Soul was, in fact, the calm before the storm. You wanted to stay patient and then push really powerfully and they had a lot of, energy, and chaining capabilities. Most of it was actually based around chaining capabilities with, chain lightning melee with top tree originally. Chaos Reach and Ball were very weird, but, middle path, and then bottom tree was teleport, and they all, all the storm trains got buffed because they all condensed them. But I just don't like the feel of Arc 3.0. It just feels off. It doesn't. You're either super aggressive, which you don't have any now healing to back it up, and with all the handling, you get like handling buffs because Amplify. That's just how it works. But you don't get enough to really sustain, and that's truly the problem with it. And then they gave every class our good old-fashioned. Our good old-fashioned ionic traces, which give you energy. The only thing we got now is ionic energy now makes us amplified, which personally I know they needed something because they're trying to add in like fragment type of thing. But ionic traces, the fact that we lost those kind of hurts, because here's the thing: amplified to us, while yes it buffs our abilities, we no longer have any one shots. Void was taken away. Solar I don't think ever had any, which I think is perfectly fine based on the way it is. Arc's last one was the slide melee, which now is nerfed because it was not supposed to one-shot. We now have our offensive option is now back to a 2-hit melee, which I understand for balancing. They don't want one-shots in here, especially, very offensive ones. But truthfully, if it was just only one-shot while it was amplified, that would probably be a lot better. But no, it just doesn't one-shot anymore. So now, ionic traces are, they make you amplified. And I guess it does kind of help that you can get them from arc abilities or jolting blinded people, which is a lot easier to proc, especially with some of the new things like Volt Shot nowadays. But it just doesn't feel like, I don't know how to say this. You're either like moving really fast. Like personally, I just don't think Arc Soul should ever be used unless you're using Getaway Artist, because the fact when you set it down you have to leave your rift means you're probably not going to get it back for a bit. So it means you probably were investing in mobility to move faster to get around the map more. That would also mean you're not investing in recovery or discipline, which is what most Warlocks should be. Or I guess technically if you're running this you should be going into strength because you're using your melee. But it's just not. It doesn't feel like a Warlock class. I don't know why they gave the melee thing to the Warlocks for this, because we had a grenade mod. So why would we not get another grenade mod when we are the class that's supposed to be based around grenades? They gave it to Titans, which the worst thing is that the one grenade mod they got literally broke the game for like months because the tracking grenades on storm grenades were really dumb, and they still are dumb. Storm grenades were literally only meant for Warlocks, and they didn't really have much use, but with them giving everyone everything, a lot of grenades now feel underpowered, and truthfully, blinding grenades are practically only good in PvE, unless you're running, Sacrifice. But that wasn't even ours to begin with. I think, personally, this just comes from, I don't think Arc's fragments are just the best. I think Arc's fragments are probably the most boring out of all of them. Yes, they give you like things from like other classes, but Arc just has some boring fragments. I think if Arc's fragments just got reworked entirely, I would be perfectly fine with it, because they're just the most forgettable. There's nothing really like, they're powerful, don't get me wrong, but they're just boring. And that's just how I feel of Arc 3.0 is. Everything that was fun is kind of just lost. Not as bad as Solar, though, because Solar is still a train wreck, but it's not as good. Alright, now we're getting to the part that I'm not going to talk much about, but I will go into Stasis. Now, Stasis is very much the only, like, kind of viable, PvP, like, at least Shadebinder is the only Stasis like class that kind of lived. Revenant was going for a really long while, but it's kind of died off. But Shadebinder still has some great like freeze potential. They're just really annoying in PvP, so I think they're also pretty fun. But originally when it came out, I heard horror stories of, you know, Hunters shadow diving people and Titans being like the movement gods with Behemoth. But then I heard Warlock only had a broken melee that kind of got fixed later on. So it wasn't like broken while Shadow Dive and Behemoth were still, you know, running rampant. So, I mean, I guess haha, very funny, because now it's the only one that, you know, really lives on. I guess Revenant Hunter still has, you know, shatter skating the same way Hunters use solar for well skating. But Stasis, right now Stasis is in a problem, because right now Stasis, Warlocks are really meant for freezing, you know, which is something that's supposed to be really good against, you know, certain champions. And, you know, in Crucible, it's perfectly fine. But in PvE, Stasis is really just outshined by Strand now. And if our thing was freezing, which was nice because it stopped champions, you know, it stopped their path and you have time to shoot them, but everything did less damage. Where now you have Suspend, where there's no downside for stopping the enemies, except their, you know, their hitbox is slightly moved up. So now we have a problem of Stasis and Strand, and which one is better, and Stasis will lose 99% of the time, unless you have, like, because technically Chill Clip, but what's the point if you can just suspend someone with a Titan Barricade? Or compared to, like, I think another problem with it is the fact that Stasis and Strand clash with each other. So if you're using a Stasis thing and you freeze someone, it takes them out of their Strand suspension. So now you're playing a game of tug of war. You are actively hindering your teammates for using Stasis, which I don't think should be a thing. Freeze should not. I don't think freeze should work with Suspend. If you freeze someone in midair and you shatter them, just have it do the shatter damage, move on. There should not be taking them out of Suspend, which is personally why you don't see these things in. You don't see these things in PvE as much, but it's still okay. Here's the thing though. This one is at least still fun to use, especially with Headstone, where you can get a bunch of grenades and the funny little stasis turrets going. So, it's just very much against Strand. And Strand is, you know, the popular thing with, you know, Lightfall. And you have a bunch of Strand, you know, Titans going around that are putting up barricades and suspending, and you're literally actively hindering them. Which I don't think any subclass should be doing. You should be, you know, really helping your team, not hindering them by putting a stasis grenade. So, you know, I'm not exactly a game dev, but I believe, you know, Shatter should not, or at least freezing should not put him out of it. That would be, you know, just a nice thing to make it so, you know, they actually have combo, you know, because darkness would actually be kind of cool. But now to get on to the part where I actually, you know, have actually cared more about Strand. Now, I think Strand is... Okay, so my opinion have been changing very frequently with, you know, just the way the game's been coming out. I think Suspend is really cool. I think the idea of using Threadlings for us is really cool. And I think our aspects are just kind of... How do I say? I don't think that they're bad. I just think they're underwhelming. Because, alright, I understand that we didn't really get anything, because Hunters got a dodge that late spawns a version of themselves, Titans got a cool jump melee, and we got Tangles we throw now get Suspend. And Threadlings drop, you know, Tangles. Which, I think that could work. Especially now that Threadlings drop Tangles, so, you know, it actually, you know, synergizes. But the new thing just doesn't really... Like, it just kind of feels like, oh, well, no, they have Tangles, so we'll give it to them. Because right now, the problem with the whole thing was, this thing was based on, oh, you gotta use grappling hooks and fly around the city of Neomuna, and oh, grappling hooks can be such, like, a big thing. But when grappling hooks are really only based for Hunters, and we get, you know, summoning, that's nice and all, but I want to use a grappling hook, because, you know, that's kind of what the big part of the DLC was. In which, yes, you can, especially with, you know, the melee drops to, you know, Threadlings, but, like, we don't, besides our Threadlings, we don't have anything that like really changes like the way we play. The closest thing we got was actually the arc melee. We got no new animations. We just got tangles, in which most of us are already using. Most of us, it's actually probably going to pair really well with swarmers now, but I don't think of us as we aren't a summoner. The only time we ever actually summon is with our rift. We are which should have been better, a necromancer. We spawn these little tangles from killing enemies, which I think would have been a lot cooler anyways, because, you know, green, necromancy, you know, balloons, stuff like that. And truthfully, I'm just kind of, it just doesn't, Strand does not feel just fun and high end. I know that they're talking about buffing our little threadlings, which is fine, but we just don't have anything except threadlings. I guess, yes, most, but like, with woven mail being one of the strongest things that gives you really good resistance, we don't generally get much of that. We mainly are based around threadlings, and threadlings are just not, in PvP, they're not the best because tracking sucks. In PvE, they're not the best because tracking sucks and they don't do much damage to higher health enemies. So and the problem is, especially when they perch on you and you start shooting, let's say, there's a person with a lot of damage, and you shoot them, and then your threadlings hop off to go damage them. In situations, that's sometimes fine because you just want to get a lot of damage off on like a boss. But the fact you can't choose, meaning, hey, if I shot a guy and then the hatchling went off to shoot like a red bar, I just lost one of my hatchlings. They went to kill a red bar that I shot and like killed in 2 shots. Or I shoot a boss when I actually want to shoot a guy once on the other side and be like, no, attack him. You see, it's just very much, we're not really in control of the threadlings because they just kind of hop on and go. You toss them down and they do their own thing. And that is truthfully why I don't think we are like fun. It's not really, I mean, yes, it's fun to watch, you know, little babies go out and do things, but it's just, we don't have as much control over it as we should. And I love using the grappling hook, which is actually why I think grappling with a grappling hook tangle melee to spawn more threadlings is fun. But now with, you know, they're trying to give you more reasons to break that tangle, which already isn't that fun. Because, if you're shooting a tangle, you're not shooting an enemy. Which, I understand, it's like kind of, the tangles are really just a replacement for the war mines, but give you your grapple back. And they're on a timer, which I understand is also getting changed, but that 15-second timer is very much killing them right now. And Strand is just, I feel like we just had the short end of the stick here. Granted, I feel like for most Strand, you know, Lightfall is already kind of disappointing. So, with the story and then having everything in the story be based around Strand, but I feel like its introduction just wasn't the best. They had an entire DLC based around it, and I still get this feeling of, man, I don't know anything about this. Like, I guess it's supposed to be like go with the flow, but like it just doesn't feel like I really learned much. They just kind of shoved it down my throat and said, yeah, understand. And then they make you sit there for like 10 hours getting Strand meditations, which I think is... I actually enjoyed the frickin' Beyond Light, those challenges to get your fragments more than I do Strand, because it is just annoying to get Strand meditations. Because it costs like 200 for one fragment, and you don't get fragments fast unless you're doing very specifically things on Neomuna, which is an entire own thing because everything on Neomuna is over leveled, and they're trying to make you use, you know, your abilities on Neomuna, which we already established Threadlings are very much not good against higher health enemies. But now I'm just going to get into some of the Warlock basics. Now, for some of the Warlock basics, Rift overall is just kind of always going to fall behind. There's no matter what you do to Rift, there is no way you could truly balance it, which is already why Warlocks are going to suffer. Rift has a healing element or a damage element, depending on if you choose either the healing Rift or the empowering Rift. And here, if you buff the healing element, let's say you get more health, then you're already, you're already seeing problems here. You start shooting somebody, and you're going to get to the point where, man, I shot him 10 times, and now the rift's already put him back at full health, and it's already become as annoying as a hunter dodging with Warmoth's crown. Or if you increase the empowering rift, they're going to start getting more and more damage, and then PvP is going to really be rampant with, oh, I set down a damage rift in one spot, you cannot move, you cannot get anywhere in my sight, or else I'll like 2-tap you with something that really shouldn't be 2-tapping. Which is already a problem in of itself. But I think, honestly, something with the rift needs to be changed. Maybe like a damage reduction or a faster speed up time. Because you are a stationary target in there. You literally have a small area to stand where you get nothing. You get no cover unless you set behind cover, which is very limited in some maps and some like overall and some strikes. Or if you have the empowering rift, there's literally no point of running an empowering rift unless you're literally playing PvP. Which I understand some things are literally meant for PvP. But empowering rift, literally, unless you're running Seek and Filaments, like, is not worth it in the slightest, because that damage boost in PvE will not outdo the 3 shots that they'll do to you. Not to mention with, the fact we're losing our healing thing, and then with us losing our arc melee to Titans, and, solar hunters. Warlocks have sadly just became only well. And high end, they're literally only well. You will always see builds for, oh, this new Broodweaver, oh, this new Stormcaller is really fun to use. But no matter what happens, we're always going to be there for well. In which is fine, but we have Bubble, which I think should be buffed because, or nerf well back down to a bubble type thing, because I understand Bubble's like very much more defensive than well is. But there's just some inconsistency, such as if you die with well stays up. If you die with Bubble doesn't stay up. Which I think either have well die when the user dies, which would actually make it more realistic. Because if you die, your super should end. That should be for like most supers. But then for any other like balance changes, Warlock's jump's always gonna be weaker because they have they need to float. That's just kind of the thing. And nerfing transverses won't do it. The same way nerfing stompies is kind of dumb because truly the only problem with it was the jumping, not the actual movement speed. But Warlocks are just, I don't know how to put this. Bungie's just been slowly, especially, okay, the thing, with Solar, our exotics are very much tuned around our abilities. Very much we have a lot of neutral game exotics, we have a lot of exotics that just don't, matter, such as, when's the last time you saw someone using the good old-fashioned Apotheosis Veil, or something like that. We have a lot of exotics that just kind of get, shafted, because 90% of our exotics are based around our abilities, which is, yes, that's how it's supposed to be. But, like, especially with the new changes coming, like, oh, super, oh, like, now it's, like, not swap, where they don't want you to change the supers because, change super exotics. A lot of stuff like that is just hurting us because we have a lot of things based around those. And especially with the Starfire Protocol nerf, which, honestly, Bungie is one of the worst companies for this, because they nerfed it after we've been asking for years for an ornament. The season they nerf it and make it literally so it's like, alright, so for perspective, it used to be like 25% on damage to like 2.5%. With that entire nerf, we got the first Starfire Protocol ornament, which is, I feel like that's Bungie literally just saying, yeah, you guys don't like having fun. We don't like having fun. This has been overpowered for too long, which I understand. It was very much out of tune, but it shouldn't have gotten that part of an nerf, because now there's the only reason to really run it is for the fusion grenade, is for the double fusion grenade, because originally I wasn't really a fan of it, but when it came out with the ability to, oh, solar grenade kills now also heal you, it's like, alright, you know what, I can live with that, because now throwing grenades actually gives me health, because Solar Warlock weirdly has a survivability issue if they aren't, running Healing Rift, which is something that Starfire Protocol could have actually been really good with because it gives you more rifts. But, I don't know, it's almost like they don't want you to throw grenades, so the one thing we had to throw grenades just got nerfed. Let's go back to Bungie's philosophy. Less abilities, less one-shots, more gunplay. Warlocks have gunplay, I think at most, airborne, which AE in itself is already not really enjoyed by most fans, especially because they add skill-based matchmaking in, and boy Bungie, edits is they want to have, skill-based, which is 100% fine. I understand you don't want noobs getting, run over by it. But the problem is you're taking away the way of showing your skill. Because now, little Timmy here is playing the flat ground simulator as the streamer has been playing for like 5 hours a day. And now you're in this infinite loop of, man, this streamer looks practically like this game that like a 10-year-old could be playing. You see, they're taking away skill expression, which is never good in a game. You should, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna keep buffing AE slowly and slowly. Well, what is the problem? I would TDT always asks, what is the problem with hitting shots in the air? It should be easier for other classes, yes, but there is nothing wrong with being able to skillfully put yourself up in a higher position to shoot someone. Everyone should be able to, that should be something core. You should teach people to look up more. That should not be something us as the players have to suffer for because we are learning more and you guys are like, oh, we don't want you to play like that. Which is the way that it almost like Destiny feels. It is a very much a space magic game. If I want to jump and shoot a gun to make, because I want to feel good, I don't really want to invest into it. I just want to be able to do it, Because Heat Rises, I hate to say it, the fact it puts you on the map already means the only real way to get like an in-air sniper shot is with a exotic that either puts you there or using your grenade to keep you up in the air and put you on enemy radars, which means both situations you are either a sitting duck or they know where you are. So literally they just want you to keep boots on the ground unless you are like very much dedicated to building into it in any other way, which trust me, there isn't much. And the worst part is the whole reason AE was added was because they're afraid of Strand running wild with it, which in ideal, yes, that kind of makes sense. But the way that Strand actually came out with, especially with the fact that the only real ones that were using the grappling hooks are the hunters and not the Titans and Warlocks, unless they're using it to, move to reposition themselves, and then that wouldn't even matter. Listen, I'm gonna end this video. Warlocks, they need some buffs. We've been taking a few L's. I know we keep getting slow buffs like the buff to chromatic fire and buffs like those are nice, but we just need something to help Warlocks overall. And I personally believe every solar class needs a new fragment, or every new light class needs a new fragment at least, and a new frickin' aspect. Please just give us new aspects for each of them. Because just give us more flavor to the class. Give us more ways to build into it. I love what they did with Strand with adding new ones, especially for things like Hunter and Titans. Not as much Warlocks. Warlocks just feels kind of lazy, but just give us new ways to build into these old classes that we love, so that we can build them more, spread them out. I know you guys can do it. There are a lot of things. People like TDT have new exotic videos. They show new exotic ideas, where a lot of them are actually kind of balanced. Some of them are memey, of course, but things like those new exotics that are actually, because you think I recently saw with Bungie's trying to make us build in like certain like exact types. You know, Warlocks have trace rifles, fusion rifles, hunters have glaives and hand cannons, you know, stuff like that. That is perfectly fine. But don't forget the core aspects before you start adding things. That's all. Don't forget the foundation. Alright, well, this is more of a ranty video for me. I've been going on for about a long time. But I've been having this thing after I watched a video from... I'll link it, because that guy actually goes a lot more in depth. I don't exactly agree with everything he says, but it's still a good watch. This guy has a lot more views than me. I'd appreciate if you went to his video. He's not in here, but, you know, if I'm getting inspiration from someone, I'm going to keep them in mind. Alright. Like, comment, sub, peace.